Good morning, Justice Chandru.
Morning, madam.
Good morning.
Professor, with your permission, shall we start?
You still have a minute to go. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Professor. Ms. Murmur.
A very good morning to the August gathering here today of our respected Vice Chancellor at Tnnlu, Professor Dr. V.S. Elizabeth, respected Registrar Madam K.R. Leela, who is also a senior civil judge, our chief guest, Honorable Justice K. Tnnlu, retired judge of the Madras High Court, respected dignitaries, invitees, participants, colleagues, and my dear students. I am Mrinmoy Mukherjee, Assistant Professor of Law at the Tamil Nadu National Law University, Tiruchirappalli. As we stand at the threshold of the inaugural ceremony of the virtual national conference on interdisciplinary perspectives into the issues of women migrant workers and laws in India, organized by the Legal Center for Women's Welfare at the TNNLU, I would like to emphasize that we at TNNLU have adopted interdisciplinary research and interdisciplinary approach to the law as a part of our vision and mission of our university. It is in furtherance of this, the Legal Center for Women decided to organize a conference which looks into the challenges faced by the women migrant workers in India and the laws related to it from an interdisciplinary perspective. We have received a very positive response from academicians and students from across India and from across various disciplines, and we believe that the upcoming technical sessions will demonstrate quality research output and thus will be engaging and thought-provoking. With this, I would now request everyone to please rise for the Tamil Thai Vart. Thank you, everyone. I request everyone to please sit. I now request Ms. Shanti Samanta, who is the convener, who is the Assistant Professor of Law at TNNLU and also the convener for the conference and the faculty in charge of the Legal Center for Women at TNNLU, to deliver the formal welcome address to the gathering. Over to you, Ms. Shanti Samanta.
Thank you so much, Murmur. Thank you so much for that. A very good morning on and all present here. I am immensely happy to welcome you all to this one-day virtual national conference on interdisciplinary perspectives into the issues of women migrant workers and laws in India. I take the pride to convene this national conference because it is the first ever conference organized by the center the Legal Center for Women's Welfare. So, for those who don't know about the history of the center, a brief introduction about the center. It is one of the brainchilds of our Vice Chancellor because, like most of us know, she is an expert in feminist jurisprudence and has a serious concern over women's issues. During the year of 2020, February 2020, the government of Tamil Nadu came up to give grants for establishing or do some activities. So, by which our professor gave a proposal for this establishment of this particular center, and it was very fortunate that the Tamil Nadu government accepted the proposal, and we established this center in March 2020. So the objective of this center is primarily to sensitize the masses regarding women's issues and advocate women's welfare. So LCWW's objective is to be very precise, to achieve a gender just society. And to achieve this, we are here with big agendas and plan to conduct various conferences, legal awareness camps, workshops, training programs. We are even planning to have short-term courses on affirmative laws with respect to women. And we are also planning to have exclusive journal for the center and attract a bunch of research papers in the near future. So we'll be concentrating more on legal literacy for women, gender sensitization, women's empowerment, violence against women, and any other laws which is very much close to the welfare of women. So this particular conference is one such event to achieve the objective of the center. So just making a preliminary understanding or research on the social status of women here in India, we could see that India has dropped down in the global gender index from 108 to 112. And the data with respect to female labor force participation is also has steeply reduced since 1990s. And especially during this pandemic, there is a huge number of women who have been ousted out of this female labor force participation, who have been, comparatively with that of men. I do agree, even men have lost their jobs, but when you compare, it is the women who is being even more discriminated and pushed under a vulnerable position. So in this context, we wanted to address a serious issue, especially with that of rural women here in India. So taking up this and the pandemic situation, the primary thing which came up to our mind is to address the issue of women migrant workers in the context of pandemic, or in the larger context altogether. What are their legal rights? How are they legally positioned? How are they socially, economically, and sometimes to a certain extent, even how are they politically being placed in this particular country is the prime thing which came up to our mind. So that made us to come up with this idea of taking up a virtual conference on women migrant workers. And this objective is to understand, we have now just crossed almost 75 years of independence, and we have come up with a bunch of affirmative laws which speaks about the women's health, say maternity, mental health, or even recruitments. We have bunch of laws, but what have we achieved? Does it have some class perspective, or does it have some caste perspective? Why there are a bunch of women who are always being deprived of any kind of rights which is being generally provided to the citizens of India. So we are just expecting an output. By this conference, we are hoping to come out with a scientific method to address various social, economical, political, and legal issues faced by the women migrant workers. So I hereby extend my heartfelt gratitude and welcome to our chief guest, Justice K. Chandru, to this event. He is a very humble human being and accepted our request the moment we just asked him. And I'm so glad that even I have witnessed Justice Chandru's, court hall. The way he disposes the cases very sensibly, and I have also read few of his works, books, and I'm so I just admire him for the proper philosophical understanding towards the society, and not only expressing them in his books, but also you could say each and every judgment pronounced by Justice Chandru will always have a philosophical background. He'll never have any random judgments coming out, random interpretation of laws. He'll be very particular in imbibing all the philosophical thoughts which he has taken up.
Shanti,
And
there has been a disturbance in the audio. I think participant number 2170128, Mr. Ashpratap Singh, has to mute himself. That is causing a lot of disturbances. So
I request the IT department to do the needful.
The host will have a privilege to do that.
I couldn't mute.
If everyone can keep their mics muted while somebody is speaking, then there will not be this disturbance. So kindly switch off your mics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Yes, I think there will be no more disturbance. Thank you so much. So I extend my heartfelt gratitude and warm welcome to our chief guest of this function. I extend my sincere gratitude to our Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. V.S. Elizabeth, who is our mentor and who is very particular in encouraging all the young faculties here in Tnnlu. And she also guides us with many new perspectives, I would say the right perspective to think or to look upon any social issues which we see or which we discuss in our day-to-day life. I welcome you, ma'am, for this conference. I welcome all the chairpersons for the technical sessions who was graciously accepted to chair the session. I also must extend my sincere gratitude to our registrar, Ms. K.R. Leela, who always encourages us constantly and even gives us innovative ideas to look upon. She is one of the most kindest administrators I have ever seen, and she's very approachable. Thank you so much, ma'am, and I welcome you for this conference. I must here definitely welcome all my co-chairs, my colleagues of Tnnlu, who have graciously accepted to my invitation, and they are very happy to even co-chair these sessions. Thank you so much, everyone. I welcome all the participants, the paper presenters who showed immense interest in our conference. I extend my heartfelt welcome to my colleagues who never failed to encourage us and helped us throughout the process of this, organizing this conference. I welcome our students who are always eager to learn new things and come up with new questions which even makes us think in a different perspective. Thank you, everyone. I also welcome all our administrative staffs who are the pillars of our university, but for whom we cannot run this university very successfully. And once again, I welcome each one of you present here for this conference. Thank you so much for making it time and being part of this conference. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mrunmoyee. Over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Samantha, for the welcome note. I now request our Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. V.S. Elizabeth, to deliver the presidential address to the gathering. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Ms. Mukherjee, and thank you, Ms. Samantha, for your kind words. I want to start this by, first of all, adding, my own greetings to Justice Chandru for having been so kind enough to accept our invitation at such short notice. Not everyone of his stature would be so humble and, supportive. And I really deeply appreciate, sir, your kind cooperation and making yourself available for this one-day national conference on the interdisciplinary perspectives into the issues affecting our women migrant workers. I also, at this juncture, want to welcome the various chairpersons who are present here today, especially Professor Dr. Rose Burgess, who is the Director Academics of Ramaya College of Law. Thank you, Dr. Rose, for having accepted my invitation and being present here for this inaugural session. I just have a few words to say in terms of these presidential remarks, because we're all eager to hear Justice Chandru as he inaugurates this national conference. Respected Justice Chandru, my dear colleagues, all the participants who have signed up for this one-day national conference and the papers that you have submitted. It is indeed my privilege to inaugurate not just this one-day national conference, but also to inaugurate the activities of the Legal Center for Women's Welfare. While we have already been conducting many activities in the course of the last 1 year, this is the first conference bringing together various people who are researching in the areas of women and law, and also the professors and people from the judiciary as well, in order to reflect upon a particular section of women in India's population. As Ms. Samantha pointed out, the status of women in India in general itself is poor. We have, of course, laws. There is no saying anything against the laws. We have one of the best constitutions in the world. We have numerous laws which presumably have been enacted in order to protect or safeguard women's rights and to enhance their welfare. But the fact remains, 75 years or in the 75th year of our independence, that we are far from achieving anything close to equality of women and men or of all genders in our society. The reason why you need a conference like this is precisely because of the way in which women's interests, women's issues have been sidelined, marginalized at various levels in every single field. In patriarchy, obviously, other than the male gender, no other gender has any space. They only serve the interests of patriarchy, and we cannot shy away from that fact as much as we'd like to imagine and pretend everything is fine. Fact is that it isn't. And if you look at the various, sessions that we have for this conference itself, the technical session 1 deals with women migrant workers, international instruments, constitution, and state. We wanted to start with that, with the laws that are there both at the state, national, and international levels, because of the fact that we recognize that there are very many empowering laws that are there at various levels, and India has signed some of the international conventions, which all empower our judiciary to interpret the national laws or to fill up the gap in the national laws in order to safeguard women's interests, or where there are no laws in order to provide that space. For example, sexual harassment at the workplace, there was no law at all prevailing in India, but thanks to the Supreme Court, the Vishaka judgment, today we have the 2013 Act to protect women at the workplace against sexual harassment. So we wanted to start from there, we start from there, and which is, of course, reflective of an abstract idea of justice and also of justice and equality at a theoretical level. So at a theoretical level, at the legal level, there is formal equality. But when we move to the other sessions that we have identified, crimes and sexual harassment against women migrant workers, the extent of violence which prevails in our society, which prevents women on a day-to-day basis from accessing their rights, is a fact. I'm the vice chancellor of a university. I'm 60 years old. But even I, when I step out of my house, have to become alert and aware, like as if I'm treading a minefield, because of the fact that even today, I am subject to sexual harassment if I have to take off, my mind for a minute from the fact that I am in the public space and, therefore vulnerable to any kind of violence from any man on the street. Whether I'm walking down the street, whether I'm traveling in a bus or in an aeroplane or, the trains, it is a fact of life. So I may not be subject to sexual harassment at my workplace, but I most certainly am vulnerable to sexual harassment in all public spaces. And my age doesn't matter. We've read about women who are 75, 80 years old, who have been brutally raped and killed even. Right? So it isn't about age. It isn't about whether you are good looking, bad looking, whether you are, fat, thin, whether you're educated, uneducated. None of these factors matter. Whether you're married, not married, none of these factors matter. All that matters is that you're a woman. And when you're a woman who is belonging to a vulnerable section amongst the marginalized sections, then your vulnerability increases tremendously. So when you look at women migrant workers who largely come from the scheduled caste as well at the most maybe backward caste communities, I don't know if there are any women migrant workers who come from any of the middle and upper castes. Right. So when you keep that position in mind, together with, the religious identities, we have many religions in our country, and some of the communities which belong to particular religions are further marginalized. So when you look at women who belong to a marginalized religious community, to Dalit community, to backward caste community, being lower class, you can just imagine what is their vulnerability and to what extent they are subject to sexual harassment and other forms of violence against women. The third technical session goes into the aspect of labor rights, women migrant workers and labor rights. So I started off my remarks this morning by saying that women as a class are discriminated against and are subjected to various forms of violence, that women's status in general is lower than that of men in any society, not simply peculiar to Indian society. Because sometimes we think that women in the US, in the UK, in other parts of Europe have better status. Fact is no, they all live in patriarchal societies. Some countries have proactively, through affirmative action, provided greater representation for women in their legislative bodies, whereas others, have left it open. Presumably it's a level playing field, when in reality it isn't. And therefore you do not have women, or you have very few women like us, in the legislatures, right? Now, while that is the status of all women, the status of women who are marginalized is further problematic. And when we're looking at labor rights, we find that 90% of women who are in the labor force are in the unorganized sector. So first of all, I think there's only about 25 to 30% women who are in the labor force. There are maybe so many women in this particular conference, and we might see a lot of women when we are working in our workplaces, but keep in mind that including the women who are in the unorganized sector, it's only about 25 to 30% of the women who are in the recognized labor force, because we do not count, women's work as work. Right, women's contribution in their homes and through caregiving services, we do not count that as work. So whatever we calculate as work is only 25 to 30% women who are out there in that labor force, and out of that 25-30%, 90% are in the unorganized sector. So women like you and me are only about 10% of this 25% women in India who are in the labor force. So all these labor legislations we talk about, maternity relief, minimum wage, equal remuneration, all of these things barely apply to these women. And I don't even know, while of course the 2013 Act, regarding sexual harassment extends to women in all sectors, we do not even have internal committees in the formal sectors. I cannot imagine what is the situation for women who are in the informal sectors, like in the labor force, in construction, etc. The last session for today will deal with women migrant workers and the legal measures that are necessary in order to enhance women's rights. Now, just looking through these, topics for today and the various papers, there are a variety of papers that have been submitted on the broad topics that I have just identified. All of them tell you that the situation of women migrant workers is far from well in this 75th year of India's independence. We have much to celebrate. We are an independent country. We do have equal. We have a constitution. We have various legislations which all guarantee formal legal equality. But the reality for the majority of the women is that they are far from exercising and enjoying these rights. Even women like you and me. And even the other day, we had a deputy superintendent of police, talking to our students on opportunities ahead. And she herself, accepted the fact that as a woman police, as a policewoman, the way in which she's perceived by fellow officers, by her superiors, even her juniors, is that work is not priority for her, right? Because we live in a patriarchal society, the assumption is women's major responsibility is in fulfilling and performing their gender roles. It doesn't matter how senior you are. It doesn't matter what kind of status you occupy at your workplace. Your primary responsibility is to your family. I mean, in fact, the health minister in Karnataka was bewailing the fact that young women these days don't get married or get married late and will not get pregnant, will not have babies. In a country where we are worried about, the high rate of population growth, I don't know why he is worried about that. But the question one has to ask is, why is it that educated women are deferring marriage? Why is it that educated women are either postponing giving birth or not giving birth at all? Because the other side of the story is the high maternal mortality rate that this country has. And who are the women who are dying? Not necessarily women from the middle and upper class and castes. It is your poor migrant women workers, the rural areas. I mean, the pandemic exposed how bad our health system is. Even in the cities with so many private hospitals, they still could not cope with the number of patients who are coming in. And we really do not know the full story of what happened in rural India. The women migrant workers, women in rural India who die in childbirth, die because of the lack of health facilities. Now, when we keep all of these factors in mind, I think it is very important that we bring to our study of women migrant workers not the perspective of a lawyer, because from the perspective of a lawyer, everything seems so fantastic. In fact, oftentimes the arguments that you hear from many men in our society is that there are so many laws to protect women. And we as women are frustrated that you cannot even walk with confidence down a street without worrying about being sexually assaulted or with some, dirty comment being whispered into your ear or somebody touching your body. So where are these laws? So it is not by using the perspective of a lawyer that you can understand these issues that we are trying to, go into today. It is from using an interdisciplinary perspective. As a sociologist, as a feminist, as an economist, as a political scientist, as a social worker, it is from these perspectives you have to examine these laws and see what is wrong with them. What is wrong with our legal system? That we supposedly have so many laws and yet women's interests and rights are not protected, and particularly marginalized women like the women migrant workers. Of course, in the women migrant workers, you can include women, in the IT sector and others who are also all migrating from one state to another. There are so many of them in my own city of Bangalore. But to a certain extent, they are protected. And of course, in other ways, they are not protected because they're all working in the private sector. And the IT industry seems to, the government follows a hands-off policy. So there are really not too many laws which regulate their hours of work or, about hiring them as well as dismissing them. The kind of security that those of us who work in the public sector have, they obviously do not have. But at least they get paid well. And of course, work is extracted from them to that extent. But look at the condition of those who do not belong to that educated class of women, that 10% who are in these sectors. look at that 90% women migrant workers who are migrating either to work in other fields, women migrant workers who are migrating towards construction sites, or other such labor requirements that are there in all these urban areas. Look at the kind of basic living conditions and working conditions. Just a couple of years before the pandemic, there was this entire thing about toilets for women. Stop to think about these women migrant workers and their access to something as basic as toilets. What do these women do? I seriously wonder. Because those of us live in urban areas, we have a toilet attached to our bedrooms. So we don't have to worry about it. If you're working in your institution, there are, a bunch of toilets at the end of every corridor on every floor. What do women migrant workers do in a country where they're subjected to violence, even for just, wearing a sleeveless dress? What do women migrant workers do? Because on the other hand, we do know that there are no such restrictions of modesty and other things upon men socially. And as a consequence, they have no issues about relieving themselves at any time of the day, anywhere in the world. But what about women migrant workers? When you're looking at conditions of living and of work, we need to look at simple, basic things like this. The next thing you'll have to look at is the wage differences. Just because it is women's work, you find that women are paid less, right? Women working in rice fields. They are the ones who transplant the rice seedlings. But if you look at the wages, they get lower wages than the wages of the man who is plowing the field or sowing the seed. Similarly, at the construction site, women who carry those bricks, sometimes climbing up the scaffold in order to pass that, they get paid less than the man who is, plastering the walls with the cement. So when you look at women's work, how it is not valued in comparison with the work that men do, and on top of it all is the vulnerability to sexual harassment and sexual violence at the hands of fellow workers and their supervisors, the contractors, and everybody else. And keep in mind, alongside all of this, for these women migrant workers, is their duties and roles as mothers. Almost every single one of them will have babies. And it isn't that all these women have choice when to have a child, how many children to have, how to space the children. All they have is that they get pregnant. So she might be pregnant, having one little baby, another 3-year-old, another 7-year-old, and then comes a cycle, right? So the oldest girl child there will become then the caretaker of these little ones. And this woman has to run between, her job in order to breastfeed the child or to attend to other needs of the child. And on the other hand, you have women in the urban sectors, in the formal sectors, where you might have a creche and other facilities. So when we are looking at the various issues that affect women migrant workers, let's use the feminist perspective, because when you use the legal perspective and legal methods, then formal equality is out there, and then we don't see any problem with the law itself. And I would say the problem starts with our conceptualization of the issues that affect women's lives, from conceptualization of the crimes against women to the need to understand what is it that women need in order to live a life of dignity. It isn't about what men in parliament have decided is good for the women. It is what is it that women need. And unless we enact laws which respond to the needs of women, and this is the reason why we need to use the feminist methods, feminist legal methods of asking the woman question. What is the impact of these laws that we are legislating on women? What is the impact of all these judicial decisions on the lives of these women? Has it made or will it make a real difference in terms of their ability to exercise their rights as citizens of India? To using feminist practical reasoning. Why are women where they are? Because oftentimes the question is, why doesn't a woman leave a violent man, an abusive husband? Use feminist practical reasoning. Ask that woman why she's not doing it. Why do women work in jobs which have sexual harassment? right? And somebody may be subjected to sexual harassment on a regular basis, and yet she might not complain. You need to find out, why is she not complaining? Why don't women protest? So unless we use this together with the other feminist method, consciousness raising, to make women realize that the inequality that they are subject to and experiencing is not because of them, something lacking in them, that it is systemic, it is institutional, it is a society that is at fault, women will continue to put up with violence within their homes and outside. Women will continue to not access their rights under the Constitution, both within the home and outside, because they think it is their fault. And so I hope that in this day-long session that we have, that all of you would bring to bear the interdisciplinary approach to studying each one of these issues, so that at the end of the day, we have some clarity about the way forward. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share these remarks.
Thank you, Professor, for your enlightening address and a thought-provoking introduction to the conference, which highlighted the need for deliberation on the plights of women migrant workers in the patriarchal setup which is prevailing in the society from the lens of various disciplines of study. Now, I would like to welcome our chief guest for the inaugural session, Justice K. Tnnlu, who is the retired judge of the Madras High Court. I would like to briefly introduce our chief guest. Justice Krishnaswamy Tnnlu had enrolled as an advocate in 1976 and was designated as a senior advocate in 1997. He appeared in a number of cases relating to human rights and freedom of the press. He has consistently championed the cause of the underprivileged, be it a worker, woman, child, Dalit, or political prisoners. He was appointed as a judge of the Madras High Court in the year 2006, and he retired in the year 2013. After retirement, he has been regularly writing columns in newspapers and magazines, and he has been regularly invited to give lectures at various judicial academies across India. He has also lectured at National Law University, Nagpur, and Savita Law School on labor laws. He has authored several books in Tamil and English, and his articles have been compiled and published as 4 books in English and 6 books in Tamil. He has also written for various newspapers in English as well as Tamil on topics relating to law and the judiciary. We are really honored to have you with us, Justice Tnnlu, and I now request you to address the gathering. Over to you, sir.
Greetings to all of you. I think you have a long day to discuss several topics. I'm glad that I'm also given an opportunity to circulate a paper which I prepared some 2-3 years back, which may work as a background paper. But one is important thing in this seminar topic is that the problem of migrant labor, nobody concerns, nobody discusses. And I'm glad that you have taken a portion of that discussing about the women migrant labor, which is much more serious issue. What is most important is that the awareness of such an issue. There are 2 ways that you can just ignore the issue, which our administrators have done for so many years, or try to understand the issue and try to find out what best that could be done. You will all be surprised that 100 years ago, a great Tamil poet, Mahakavi Bharati, he sang on the migrant workers in the Fiji island working in the sugarcane fields. And it is also, the translation is available. I've also quoted that song in my paper, which is circulated to you. What is important is that some 100 years back, that somebody could think and write a poem on the women who suffer outside their home, outside their country, in a faraway place, without any working condition. And Mahakavi Bharati never went out of India. Maybe perhaps the French territory was there for asylum. beyond the seas of India, he never went. But he could think of the Hindu women who were suffering in the sugarcane field, how to send words to them. The strict British police and their censorship and their logistic restrictions, nobody can. But then he invites the wind, asks several questions and find out, because according to him, at least when nobody else knows about their plight, the wind may know something about them. And he says in one of the sentences that, "Oh wind, you have heard their sigh," because except the British police and the nobody else would have heard their miseries. But the one small distinction was, when the Britain had so many colonies, their mother country, they had advanced labor laws. Some of the labor MPs have raised these issues about the plight of the colony workers. All that they did was to send some Royal Commission of Labor. These reports are available, but the commission never recommended anything serious because that is also against their economic interest. Thinking of labor, the economic interest of the employer much more is concern of the colonial country. Then what they did was to make the colonies separate from the British. Even a British India made a separate country, which was made part of the ILO, which is a very paradox. In 1919, when Bharati was singing this song, India became a member of the ILO, not as an independent India, but as a British colony. And some other colonies were made independent members of ILO, not having any power to legislate on any of these issues. If the British want, they can. When these issues were raised seriously in the British Parliament, the British response was not very appreciable, because it also has a bearing on the economic question of their investments. And therefore, for the first time, when India became independent, when the Indian working class, which was part of the political movement of this country, which was promised in several of the Congress conventions, that the moment we get independence, yours will be the first care. And therefore, some of the legislations came at the time of the independence, even in the interim cabinet in 1946. Some of the laws were made. But one important issue was the partition made on the religious basis, and subsequently states carved out on linguistic basis, also had an impact on the labor who are working in different parts of India or the erstwhile British colonies. When the constitution came, and it also guaranteed that you have a right to settle throughout the territories of India, right to carry on any trade you want, there is some kind of a obstruction. I think we should also discuss, which I'll deal with it a little later, one important issue of the migrant labor. Who is a migrant? In fact, Vice Chancellor was talking about migrant labor. The fundamental flaw in our, she was referring to the IT sector. The fundamental flaw of our Migrant Labor Act is the definition of who is a migrant labor. If you have a order of appointment, you are not a migrant labor. So all the IT sector are out. So what is this distinction to make your status depend upon employer giving you few lines of appointment? This is another issue, that what the ILO recommended and what finally we ended up doing was totally on a different basis. Now we have a free India. We have states having its own autonomous rights to make laws, make living conditions, and the labor being a concurrent subject. We have a 40 central legislations, 200 state legislations, and high courts and Supreme Court making issue after issue on labor issues. And you have, in fact, I remember in 1949, there was only one labor law journal. Today, at least, there are 10 labor law journals, monthly reporting some 200 cases per month. It's difficult to keep track of what is the views of various courts. But nevertheless, one fundamental issue, now we have this Migrant Labor Act from 1979, 42 years have gone. And how many decisions of the Supreme Court you will find on the under this enactment? It is only in a single digit. Even if you trace, you will never find. For the first time, I feel that when the Supreme Court was faced with the pandemic COVID-19 situation, when workers denied employment, denied shelter, forcibly thrown out of their workplace, not given any employment or guarantee of any salary, when they want to go home, the state stopped them from going home. And what do? They walk back, walk wherever they want. Again, the police is brought in. Some public interest cases were filed in Supreme Court, and for the first time, you'll see few orders are passed. I'm not here to make a critical remark, but one thing I will know, if you see the orders passed by the Supreme Court during the pandemic period on the migrant issue, it will only show very little scholarship on the issue. The court, which started with a brave vow of give them the work or pay them the salary, this is essentially a contract argument, but not taking into account the ground level situation. And when the employers intervene, this order of payment of salary was quietly buried. The labor commissioners were told to make discussion with the both sides to arrive at some satisfactory solution. Therefore, we have no solution in terms of law. In the sense, we have never invented a law or never devised a law to deal with the issue, because the fundamental flaw today is just the definition, number one. Number two, the growing chauvinist feelings or the so-called nationalist feeling, where every person from outside is treated as an enemy and not welcome except for their hard work. This has also posed not only the problem between the state and the workmen, but between the local population and the migrant workers. Therefore, I always, in fact, in my note also, I endeavor to say that a migrant law in future can't just be described as a labor law. It has to have several other areas of address. First area of address is what is their political right. The constitution may guarantee, but does the law guarantee a political right to them? Maybe right to exercise their franchise. Are they participating in the public distribution system? Are they voting in the area in which they are living for several years? Then the other question of their security. Every small offense or a crime, it is a migrant who are at the receiving end, because the police need not explain anything to the local population. I know in the Chennai city, near a place in Velachery, few migrants were living in a house, and there were some thefts in the ATM run by banks. And suddenly police came, entered the house, shot all of them, saying they are the robbers. What is the proof? What is the evidence that they have? But then it's called encounter. What encounter? Just kill them. Why? What is the authority? Because nobody will question them. Not a single local people ever raised their protest against such attacks. This you will find not only migrant, a person goes from this place to other place, like you saw the red sanders in Andhra Pradesh. Some tree smugglers, timber smugglers, utilize the Tamil Nadu labor from Tiruvannamalai, Salem, and Dharmaburi for tree cutting with a little higher payment. They were transported to the Tirumala forest in Chittoor district, and then the police shot all of them, and 15 people were killed. Some human rights organization took up the issue, and still it's going on. What is important is, in such a circumstances, when they are faced with a security issue, the absence of a local support, the state authorities are able to exercise a greater oppression against them as opposed to the oppression against the local people. So this is another thing. The fourth question is the serious unemployment problem. Now, the local chauvinist forces, I won't name, you will know, outsider and the insider, or the locals versus the outsider, or the so-called son of the soil, or the daughter of the soil? Now, these questions has now assumed a greater proportion. In fact, Karnataka has passed a law that every employer should employ X number of workers locally. Let them pass any law and let the law be tested in court. That's a different issue. But this jingoism, this slogan itself is enough to pose a threat to the migrant workers. Their security, their living, their constitutional guarantee, their right to live as a human being is under question. And therefore, this issue, unless the law, if any, to be passed, addresses this issue, it will be only on paper. As the Vice Chancellor said, many of the laws theoretically okay, that's all right. But then, are you addressing the basic problem? Then I will also come to another question. Now, you talk about the existing labor laws. Now, the existing laws are put to test because the employer, in the light of the liberalization and privatization, they want to make experiments with these laws. The laws which has been there for so many years, they start questioning, not directly, but indirectly, or through substitute, or through surrogate litigation, or a benami litigation. I know in 2002, in the Madras High Court, a case was filed in the name of a textile worker. She has no means, she has no concern about the law. What was questioned was Section 66 of the Factories Act, prohibiting women doing night work. There is two views on that, whether there should be prohibition or not. That's a different issue. But this particular litigation, which was sponsored by indirectly by the textile owners, finally succeeded. I argued for the women, saying that without a proper safeguard, you cannot simply say some law is bad. The law has been there for so many years, and the government can address the issue. And then you entertain some benami litigation, and then say the law is bad. The Madras High Court declared the law is bad. All right. The judge also had some sympathy for the women workers, made several recommendations saying, if you want to have a night shift, you must do all this. Provide transportation, restroom, this, that, everything he said. But then no employer obeys the direction, they don't obey. Who will obey the recommendation made by the court? But then the law, it is now, central government has not taken the issue to the Supreme Court. Now, what is the result is, we have started several textiles running a third or a fourth unit, fully mechanized, and only women are there employed. Now, how to get women? How to get the local women? Normally, parents are reluctant to send the girls to their factories. They have an incentive scheme, what is called as the Sumangali scheme, that we will provide a fat payment at the end of the 3-year tenure, and you will get your girl married. That is a marriage scheme. People were lured to go and work because it's 3 shift. Thanks to the Madras High Court, there's a night shift. Now, how many complaints came about the non-payment, about the harassment, about the bad living conditions? All these came. Therefore, some litigation was filed. What is the status of these women? In fact, the petitioners called it before us as camp coolies. It's a correct term. They are put in a camp as a coolie. And then, what is their status in a textile? Textile is one of a very big organized industry. There are bilateral, tripartite negotiations and settlements are there. Salaries are slightly higher than other areas of employment. Now, where do these workers come in? They said, no, they don't come into any of these categories. They are governed by the contract, that's all. We are giving them at the end of the service some accumulated salary. They have agreed. What is the leave? Once a month, 1 day. What about annual leave? We will send them for 1 week. The parents come and take them and bring them back. Where do they live? They live inside the factory. Who will provide them food? We will provide them the food, but deduct something from the salary. Ultimately, the local people started seeing the real color of these factories. Now, what has happened is, from the northeast, from Assam, from Nagaland, Mizoram, people have been brought in here, women workers. Some 2-3 years ago in Europe, in one house, they found some 35 women locked up in a house with one little so-called toilet. And when they made a complaint, the labor department went there and they had no power to enter a house. So they called the revenue. And then what law the revenue division officer can invoke? Which provision of IPC? Which provision of CRPC? Finally, they invoke Bonded Labor Act. opened the door and they found these women half-starved, uncared of, and then there is no safety, health, or any, what you name, any labor law. Nothing has been enforced. And then they release them. The release is again a paradox, because where will they go? Who will take them to that place? These are issues which remains to be addressed. Now the third stage we have come on the pandemic situation, when who will guarantee their continued living or a dignified living? Even going home becomes difficult. Even walking back, everything was a heroic story, not as a sociological problem. Now, why did the government drag its feet in making these workers reach their homes safely? Then I showed the Migrant Act provides for employers to pay the transportation charges. Why can't the government tell them, pay them, we'll take them in a bus or any other place? Nothing has happened. Therefore, the 79 Act today remain unused, unworkable, and never address the main issue relating to migrant. What do you do when the law is bad, the law is ineffective or insensitive or never address the problem? You have to think of some amendment. The government, some pill, somebody files a pill. Today pills have become bitter pills because the court doesn't know what is the ground level situation. So in one public interest litigation, they told all the secretaries of the various state government, implement the law. Everybody said implement the law. What is the data they have? Under this act, a migrant has to be registered. Do the state government have any registers? Do the state government has got any liaison officer? Nobody has the data. Even Tamil Nadu doesn't have a data. See, they give some vague data. These are all the migrant workers. Again, the definition question is there. Now, increasing construction work. Again, the new problem that is coming, where the women also come. They come in a group. No shelter. Building Workers Act, yes, give them shelter. Which shelter? Just live outside the work spot. The next work spot, you just ship them there with some plastic sheets. Where will they get ration? They are not taken in as a local people. And then where will the children go to school? Some school you admit them because there is a free school law. So I know I was working in a school where we have Tamil medium and we have English medium. All the local children go to English medium. All the Oriyas, Assamias, they go to Tamil medium. Neither they learn Tamil nor they learn their own language. What is the guarantee for the children to learn their own language? Who is responsible? Is the employer responsible? Is the state responsible? No. Now there's so much local body elections going on. They've been there for 3 years, 4 years, the same place. They can't vote. Therefore, the fundamental question, in my opinion, interstate migrant labor issue is no longer a labor issue. It's a political issue. Unless you give them political and civic rights, the question of safeguarding the other interests will never arise. People can be taken from A place to B place, get exploited and come back. This has been going on right from British days. They put all the railway lines only using migrant laborers, using bonded labor, using contractors. That is why when people said there should be a change, the second labor commissioner said you should address the relook or reinvent or revisit the labor laws. Now they revisited. 4 codes are ready. They've all passed in the parliament. Not a single discussion on any of these laws. Opposition boycotted. Everything is passed. You have a method in the parliamentary practice that if you want to pass a law without discussion, what is called as apply the guillotine. That is the word they use. That is without discussion pass. The speaker will say, no discussion. Are you agreeing? Everybody will say, yes, we want to go home. We want to go for Diwali. So guillotine is applied. All laws are passed. Now there is one act. This Interstate Migrant Act has been now incorporated in the OSHO, Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code, OSHO. Now we have very expert in coining abbreviations. So now this OSHO code incorporates or subsumes Interstate Migrants Act. Have they taken into account the last 42 years of experience of the working or the non-working of the act? If you see, their only intention is to consolidate, that's all. Subsume and give a new name. Don't call it as act, call it as a code. And give a long name and then make an abbreviation, OSHO code. Now, where is the provision relating to interstate migrant? They have now combined it with Contract Labor Act. Ultimately, a migrant is similar to contract labor. Now, do the contract workers in this country have any right of any labor laws, which have been old as much as 60, 70 years old? Now, the contract labor in India do not have any legal enforceable right. Therefore, you put interstate migrant also along with them. For an example, today in the workforce, in the organized workforce, at least 60% is only contract labor. Similarly, you bring in a large number of migrant workers to replace. You take in Tamil Nadu, hotel industry, construction industry, tertiary industries, agriculture operations, migrant workers. What about the local workers? They find some other place. That's a different issue. But the labor laws have become unworkable or do not address the majority of the workforce in a particular place. Now, what do? Just put them along with the contract labor. So show them the door that you are not an employee of the employer, you are an employee of a contractor. All right. Now, where will they go? A contract labor can't go anywhere else, unless he may lose his job. Similarly, migrant worker cannot complain because then they may just send them off, or the contractor may kick them off. In these circumstances, I think your university has, or your center has done a great job in organizing a seminar, and that to address a very sensitive issue of women migrant labor, which is again a further issue, because when these contract workers or the construction workers or the migrant workers, some of the tall buildings in the city were built by them, but then they have no place to go, they have no place to stay. How will these women, they will adjust to this new work environment? Who will take care of the children? They talk about crush. How many crushes are established by any construction companies? Nobody knows all these issues. And the labor department is happy about all these things. And when the question of lockdown during the pandemic period, they say work from home. Who does the women already working from home? Now, who will give them the employment to work from? What do they do during the unemployment period? Or will they come back to join the workforce? Now, every construction industry started in a big process after the pandemic. The work is started in a big way, but nobody has any data that the same workers have come back, or that their life has changed in their home state so that they're not willing to come back. All this is a mystery, because without a data, we have a government which is happily running about not addressing this issue, combined with the fact the local chauvinism of saying son of the soil, no work from outsiders, drive them out, we must have our own workers. This is another very pernicious slogans which has come up, which is completely against the spirit of the working class. The working class spirit is a workers of the world unite. Now workers of the county, they don't want to get united. Now this is another issue which the unions will have to address, where I know there are many places where there have been clashes, there have been hostility, even to provide small facility, and the employers do not address these issues, and the local governments are also not concerned. And I'm sure that your conference will address all these issues. And as your Vice Chancellor said, the laws are on paper. At least let the laws on paper on a very perfect basis, not on a very inadequate address, never understanding the problem. And I'm sure that you will also look into the provisions of the new OSHO code and to see how much the central government has seen the issue as a live and a living and organic issue. I'm glad that you at least started the exercise, and I wish the conference all success. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Tnnlu, for your address. It was an informative address which gave us firstly an historical insight into the plights of labor force in India, as well as it highlighted various contemporary challenges which continue still today, like not even having a proper definition of who a migrant labor is, Your insights on the plight of the migrant labor during the pandemic period was thought-provoking. You have also highlighted how the migrant laborers are usually even suspected of committing crimes and subjected to harassment, undermining their constitutionally protected rights, and the problem of the local and the outsider, which can be detrimental to the interest of the migrant workers. You have highlighted how it is not just a labor issue, but rather there is a need for protecting the political and the civil rights of the labor force. We thank you for your insights along with the practical instances, which would provide a good background for the upcoming discussions in the technical sessions ahead. Thank you so much, sir. And we once again bestow thanks to you to have addressed the gathering. I now request Mr. Nidish Kumar TB, Assistant Professor of Law at TNNLU, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to confirm whether I'm clearly audible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You are okay, sir.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, it is an honor for me to address this distinguished gathering. I would like to thank each and every one of you who turned out on the Saturday morning to this conference. In first place, I would like to thank our Honorable Speaker of Guest, Retired Justice Krishnaswamy Tnnlu, for beautifully articulating where exactly the law and the legal enforcement stands in this particular issue of migrant women labor and their rights. And I would also like to thank our Professor V.S. Elizabeth for beautifully articulating and giving us an exact picture of what are the social realities of women migrant labor and also women labor in India. So I see both of this address as piece in a pot, because Vice Chancellor perfectly captured the social realities and Honorable Justice perfectly capture the legal realities. And I think there wouldn't be a better way to start this conference. So I would like to thank both of the speakers, the presidential speaker and the chief guest, for rendering such good start to this wonderful conference. Thank you so much, both of you. I would also like to thank all the participants who have turned in, who have given their papers and present here. And I would wish all of you a very best, or all the very best to all of you in the upcoming technical sessions. I would also like to thank the entire organizing committee, all my fellow faculties, which will include the Registrar Madam as well as the Vice Chancellor Madam, for putting this together and making this happen. It would be not right on my part to add my student volunteers who have also done a great deal behind this particular conference. Thank you all for the student volunteers for being here and getting this done. Finally, I would also like to thank the entire community of TNNLU for your great response. Thank you so much for all for being here. And I would want to wish all of you a very good day, a very academic day all throughout the rest of the sessions. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. We will see you back in the valedicts. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. With this, we are approaching towards the end of our inaugural session, and I would now request all to stand for the national anthem. I now request everyone to please take their seat. With this, we have come to the end of our inaugural session. On behalf of the organizing committee of the conference, I thank all of you for joining us for the inaugural function, and we hope to see you for the technical sessions and the valedictory session to be held later in the day. I request all the participants, chairpersons, co-chairpersons, and the interested viewers to please join the forenoon technical sessions immediately. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.